And remember, on the day of Pentecost, we started the book of Acts. Jesus said, "And you shall be witnesses of me both in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." Now we're coming to a point where they're beginning to move towards the end of the earth. They've already, had ministry and things in Jerusalem, Judea. Part of the team went to Samaria, and so now they're coming to a whole new part of the venture with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This chapter should be the most exciting chapter for you and for me. This chapter changes everything. What happens in this chapter is one of the most important events in all of history. And I want you to see it that way, because we would not be here today. We would not be here singing to Jesus. We would not be here reading his word and talking to him and praying if it were not for this, what happened in this chapter. Okay? Pick it up at verse 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion. Oh, the centurions. The centurions were men in the Roman army that were in charge of 100 men. The centurions were the elite of the elite. They were well respected. They were men that were tough and strong, and they would never run from a fight. They did not cause problems, but they would never walk away from one. They were incredible. And there are 3 centurions that we meet in the story of Jesus. We met the first one. Remember when the centurion came to Jesus and said, "I have a servant at home, and he's sick and he's dying. Would you come?" He says, I don't even need to come, because I just know you can speak it, because I too am a man under authority. And when I speak, there's authority behind me that causes the things to happen. And you have that same authority. When you speak, there is power behind you. And remember the whole story? And the man was healed. That's the first centurion. All right? We meet a second centurion at the cross. And when Jesus dies, the centurion stand there and said, "Wow, without a doubt, surely this is the Son of God." And now we meet another centurion. And what about this centurion? He was called part of the Italian regiment. And I am so sorry I'm not using the King James Version. I almost went back to it today because it says the Italian band. And there were so many ways I could make that funny, but I don't know how you do it with regiment. A band you could do, "Hey, they're playing tonight down at Nicolino's." I don't know. So I almost used the King just so I could use that, but I did it anyway, all right? The Italian regiment was the elite of the elite. They were the strongest, most fierce of all the regiments, were the Italian regiments. Well, this centurion, Cornelius, verse 2 says, he was a devout man and one who feared God with all his household, who gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. Well, first of all, we find out what kind of man this Cornelius was. He was a great man. He prayed. He was a good man, did good things. He led his men properly. He gave money to the poor as they needed it and helped people, probably mostly to Gentiles he gave the money. And he was an incredible man. But doing good things, praying great prayers, maybe being the nicest person in the whole entire world, still doesn't give you a relationship with God. So he was a great man, but there was something lacking. About the ninth hour of the day, you need to start feeding your kids on Sunday. Because they're all hungry, man. And I appreciate none of you husbands doing the same things because I know you're hungry too, but don't start crying for food. All right. Just be good. All right. About the 9th hour of the day, so that's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was there, and he was probably was praying, and that he was probably that was the hour of prayer for the Jews, so he was praying at the same time. And he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. And when he observed him, he was afraid and said, what is it, Lord? Notice that Lord is little l. It was just, what is it? Person, apparently a great person, but not talking about God. So he said to him, your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial to God. Jeremiah 29, 11 and 13 says, if you seek God with all your heart, you'll find him. A seeking heart like Cornelius, a seeking heart will always be led to God. When you're seeking God, you'll find him. And that's just a promise, whether you're a believer or a non-believer. When you're seeking God, even as a believer, when you're seeking God for an answer to a prayer, or you're seeking God for direction, or you're seeking God for whatever it is, you will find him. You will come into his presence, because he always answers seeking hearts. And he said to him, now send men to Joppa, and send for Simon, whose surname is Peter. He's lodging with Simon a tanner, whose house is by the sea. And he will tell you what you must do. I like that. Okay, there's an angel there, and he doesn't say he's going to tell you what would be a good thing to do. He doesn't say he's going to tell you what you ought to do. He says he's going to tell you what you must do. And I love that God speaks to us. He speaks to us in his word. He speaks to us in prayer. He speaks to us as we're worshiping him. And we need to be open to that. We need to hear the voice of the Lord. No, I don't mean an audible voice, but I mean direction. We need to hear. And you know what? When we're making decisions, we should never make a decision until we know we've heard from God, until we know he's confirmed something to us in his word, in our heart, with other people, but he confirms it. And I don't do anything until, it's confirmed by God. And we've all had people come up to us. I've had people come up to me over the years and just, hey, God told me to tell you. Boy, all of a sudden I take a deep breath and I hold my breath. Okay, here we go. And what has God told you to tell me? He has my address. Why didn't he call me? But okay, I'll listen. I'm nice. And I listen, and then I just say, kindly, as I'll pray about that. And as soon as God confirms that or tells me the same thing, then I'll move on that. But it's got to be confirmed. God doesn't want mystical stuff. God's not a mystical God. God's a God that wants to reveal himself, and he doesn't do it with key words, and he doesn't do it with speaking something. If you say it enough, it's going to happen. Or if you claim it, it's going to happen. None of that's in the Bible. You just need to go to him and pray and wait upon him. They that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength, mount up with wings as eagles. Run and not be weary, walk and not faint. So it's just many times it's a matter of waiting. It's a matter of waiting for years. We have people here that have been waiting for answers for prayers, the answers that they wanted. I believe God always answers prayer. I don't believe God's ever silent and say, okay, you got to do some stuff now before I'm going to answer you. I believe he answers. Sometimes he says yes. Sometimes he says no. Sometimes he says not right now. All right? And we have to live with that and trust him. We have to come to the point that God is God. He's sovereign. He always does the right thing. And he always will do the right thing. So he will tell you what you must do. And when the angel of the Lord spoke to him, I had something I was going to say, and I realized I was saying it, not God, so I stopped. Did you notice that? Okay. You were going to interject some of your own stuff there, Charlie. And I do that all the time, but this time he caught me. And when the angel of the Lord spoke to him, had departed, Cornelius called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier from among those who waited on him continually. So when he had explained all these things to them, he sent them to Joppa. The next day, as they went on their journey and drew near the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray at the 6th hour. Then he became very hungry, and he wanted to eat. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance. Now, we don't know a lot about trances. I see trances once in a while, and it's usually while I'm teaching. Okay. and some of you have done that already this morning, but wake him up, would you, honey? But, but I really don't know what really real trance is. Maybe it's that time between awake and sleep or whatever, but this man went into a trance. And he's up on the rooftop, and he had been praying, and he got hungry. So as they're fixing his food, he falls asleep. Now, it almost sounds in our culture, went up on the rooftop. Well, in their culture, the rooftop was flat, and it was really where they would have their barbecues, and they would have their fellowships, and it's the place where they would go to be by themselves and pray. It was just another room for them that wasn't covered or enclosed or anything. And so that's what they were doing up there, and that's what he was doing up there. And he saw heaven opened, and an object like a great sheet bound on the 4 corners, descending to him, and he let down to the earth. In it were all things, all kinds of things, all 4-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air. And a voice said to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "Not so, Lord." That does not fit there. You cannot say in the same sentence, "Not so, Lord." You can say, "Not so, Fred." You can say, "Not so, Chuck." You can say, "Not so" to your husband or your wife. But you cannot say, "Not so" to the Lord. Because if the Lord says it, it's so. All right? Whatever he has said is truth, and it's so, and it's going to happen. But Peter says, "Not so." He's got a lot more guts than me. I mean, he sees this thing come down, and it's either a sheet or it's the same word for sail. And, Peter was a fisherman, so it might have been like a sail on a ship or whatever. But this thing comes down, that'd get your attention. That'd get your attention so much you would not argue with God, but he's doing that. And God says, hey, kill, eat. And he says, "Not going to happen." "Not so, Lord." And a voice spoke to him the second time. "What God has cleaned, what has cleansed, you must not call common." This was done 3 times, and the object was taken up to heaven. I don't know if you noticed or not, but Peter had a lot of 3-time experiences. Evidently, he was still not too sharp. Evidently, it took 3 times. They're at the Sea of Galilee after the resurrection. They're out fishing. Peter said, I'm going back to my occupation. That's it. It just didn't work, and it's okay. And some of the guys joined him, and they're fishing, and they fished all night and didn't catch anything. And they're bringing the boat in, and somebody hollers out, "Any fish?" Have you ever been fishing and somebody asks you got any, you didn't catch any? Just don't go drown yourself. But there's just, and it's a voice, and then this voice said, "Hey, cast your net on the right side of the boat." Now, don't you suppose they had cast that net on the right side, the left side, back side, front side, all night long trying to fish? Now he says on the right side, and okay. They caught so many fish, boat was about to sink, and so they brought it in, and it was interesting, it says that, and Peter you know, John said, "It's the Lord." And he was very sharp. And Peter jumped out of the boat and took his time getting there because he didn't want to talk to Jesus. He was kind of embarrassed. He knew what it was by now. And so Jesus started fixing breakfast for them with fish, not the ones they caught, different word for fish that he was fixing there. And he had a conversation with Peter. He asked him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me? Then go feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Then go take care of my lambs. Oh, Peter." And he uses a different word for love and says, "Do you really even like me a lot?" Uses the word phileo. Peter says, "Oh, Lord, you know that I love you. Then go feed my sheep." 3 times he had to say that. Interesting. Denied him, denied the Lord 3 times. Before the cock crows, you'll deny me 3 times, 3 times. Don't let it go that far. You don't have to see something 3 times. Let the Lord lead you and guide you and walk in the wholeness that God wants you to walk in. Now, while Peter wondered within himself what this vision which he had seen meant, you need to understand, Peter's starting to get it. But what's happening here is God is talking to Peter about the cross. God is opening up Peter's understanding of the effects of the cross and the resurrection. What that means. And it means a whole lot more than Peter understood. Behold, the men who had been sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate. And they called and asked whether Simon, whose surname was Peter, was lodging there. While Peter thought about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Behold, 3 men are seeking you. Arise, therefore, go down and go with them, doubting nothing. For I have sent you." So what does he say? Arise, go down. I said don't do anything until God confirms it. But when God confirms it, when God tells you something, you're reading a word and God says something, he wants immediate response. We don't have to think about it. When God says go, and we know in our hearts God says go, we need to go. When God says write that email to somebody, you need to forgive or you need to ask forgiveness, you do it. Somebody you're supposed to share with, go when he tells you to go. Supposed to pray for somebody, then go do it, man. You're supposed to get on your knees and just pray, then do that. Whatever God is speaking to you, you need to do that as quickly as he says it to you. Then Peter went down to the men who had been sent to him from Cornelius and said, "Yes, I am he whom you seek. For what reason have you come?" And they said, "Cornelius the centurion, a just man, one who fears God and has a good reputation among all the nation of the Jews, was divinely instructed by a holy angel to summon you to his house and to hear words from you." Still not sure what's going on, but he's still being obedient. Then he invited them in and lodged them. So Peter's starting to get it. On the next day, Peter went away with them, and some brethren from Joppa accompanied them. Now, so far what Peter's had done, no Jew would have done. It was absolutely no way that you would. Jews were filthy. They were viewed by the Jews as untouchable. The Pharisees, when they would walk through the streets, would wrap their robes around them tightly, because even if their robe touched a Jew, they had to go through a cleansing ceremony, which was quite involved. And you would walk on the other side of the street. if you were a Jew, if there was a Gentile walking on this side of the street. If you were touched, you didn't have to be a Pharisee. If you were touched, then you could not go again to the temple until you went through this incredible cleansing ceremony, which was it was difficult. It was a long, tough ceremony. So there would be no way that a Jew would go into a Gentile's house. And this is what he's done. So he's starting to get it. He's starting to understand just a little bit, what's going on here. And he's being obedient. And the following day, they entered Caesarea. Now Cornelius was waiting for them and had called together his relatives and close friends. Whoa. Anybody ready for a home Bible study? I mean, this is a home Bible study. Come on now. We're going to have this home Bible study. We're inviting everybody. It reminds me of something that happened early in this ministry, and it didn't happen this way here, but I got to tell this story. When we first started in the ministry, and God had called us to do what we were doing, we were down on Palm Canyon, and you all know the story that it became a hippie church, and it was just getting people hippies from everywhere, and they were coming out of Tahquitz Canyon and coming in on the streets, and we were a hippie church. Had a lot of hippies, and very few people who weren't hippies. But we had one very influential and wealthy couple that were coming, and they got saved, and they liked hearing the word as it was being taught through the word, verse by verse, and so they called me and said, we want to do a home Bible study. We want to, call our friends in and let you teach the word to them. And I said, well, that's great. That's cool. Well, an open door with a whole different group of people, that would be really, really fine. And so we get there, and people start coming, and then pretty soon the room is full. And the guy looks at me and nods to get started. So I opened my Bible and said, okay, would you turn to? Nobody had a Bible. So I start, okay, we're going to talk about this, and I start giving this study. I remember what the study was, too. It was about John the Baptist, and there was a whole study, and it was a pretty good study, man, but no response. And I'm thinking, you guys are duds, man. We'd had worship, and the girl that was leading the worship, she didn't have any shoes on, and I took half a dozen people with me, and they weren't dressed the same way as the rest of the people were dressed. We were up in Thunderbird, actually, and so we got through, and I looked at the guy, and I said, "So I close with prayer. What should I do now?" And she wanted to have him do another song, so she did another song, and they just sat there. So after that, they were going to serve some food and stuff, and I was talking to one guy, and he said, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you try to teach us the Bible?" I said, "Well, I was told to come here and do a Bible study." "Weren't you told that there was going to be a Bible study?" He said, "No, we were all invited to dinner." So, and I had long hair at the time too. So here's this group of long-haired people, no shoes, walking into this pretty nice house in Thunderbird, you can imagine. And we're sitting on the floor, and these people are tolerating a 45-minute Bible study. Okay, just gritting their teeth, so angry, And I went to the guy that did this, and I said, "How do you think that went?" He said, "I'm not sure. I didn't see much response." Well, of course not. Don't ever do that to me again, man. I mean, I would have been okay if you had told me ahead of time, but I'm thinking all these people are there for a Bible study. So this isn't what's going on here. Cornelius has been telling his neighbors. He had a good reputation with everybody, right? So he's telling his friends and neighbors, all about Jesus and all about God, and doesn't know Jesus yet, but all about the Jewish God and all of that. And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up. I myself am also a man." And as he talked with him, he went in and found many who had come together. Then he said to them, you know how unlawful it is for a Jewish man to keep company with or go to one of another nation? But God has shown me that I should not call any man uncommon. Don't you love that? So Peter's understanding. Therefore I came without objection. As soon as I was sent for, I asked them, for what reason have you sent for me? So Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour. In the ninth hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing and said, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard, and your alms are remembered in the sight of God. Send therefore to Joppa and call Simon here, whose surname is Peter. He's lodging in the house of Simon, a tanner. That was anti-Jewish too. The tanners were not clean people. They worked with the skin of dead animals. And when it says by the sea, tanners always worked by the sea to try to help some of the smell and the stench and so forth. When he comes, he will speak to you. So I sent to him immediately, and you have done well to come. Now, therefore, we are all present before God to hear all the things commanded you by God. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, in truth, I perceive that God shows no partiality. That's the truth that Peter needed to hear. And that's the truth we all need to hear. God shows no partiality. First of all, that's when he opened the doors for the Gentiles. We could come in. See, God chose the Jews originally, and they misunderstood. He chose the Jews to show he tells them this, to show the world what God is and who he is. And what he was going to do with the Jews was reveal to the rest of the world his goodness and who he was. But the Jews thought he chose them because they were something special. And they were something different. And so they were better than everybody else. So they had a God that was nobody else could have. They didn't understand it. So now God, after all of these years and generations, now opens the door. Aren't you glad? He opened the doors to the Gentiles. That's you and me. That's why we can have that relationship with him. And he shows no partiality. And if we were to get into talking about prejudice this morning or whatever, as believers, we should have no partiality about anybody or anything, ever. And not just in voice, but in truth. Because God shows no partiality. We're just a bunch of sinners saved by grace. And we're no better than anybody else that hasn't received Jesus. We just have a home we're going to, man. We have a God that saved us. But he died for the sins of the whole world. Everybody. Every single person. And we need to pray and let God, I don't know, I love the verse that they're using in Uganda. We need to allow the love of God to dwell in our hearts in such a way that we walk in love. Not just sing love. Not just sing love, but walk in it. When the hippie movement was going on, when the Jesus Revolution was happening, we sang a lot of songs about love. But you know what? It was real. These people were loving everybody. Not everybody loved them because we had to get them baths and stuff, but it was all okay. But they loved everybody because they realized how much God loved them. And what a statement here for Peter. Now he's going to go through some trials we're going to see next week, the next chapter. I don't know. I don't know whether to try to finish this chapter or not. It's already 1:45. You know what? We can pick it up there next week because I don't want to hurry through the next section. The next section I want to spend some time on that. So we'll just put a comma there. Is that all right? And then we'll talk about it next week. That means musicians. worship team, band. Here's my Italian band. Father, we have joy and we laugh because there's a peace inside. Because we've made a decision to receive you and come into our lives. And Lord, I made a statement last week. Turn the lights back up for just a minute, man. I'm going to put a pause in my prayer. I don't think I've ever done that. But I just want to say something to you. I mentioned it last week. I was at a funeral last week of a dear friend of mine, and his wife had passed. And she used to teach. And she'd been here to teach. And what a lady she was. Anyway, they showed a video at the end of the service. And it was her closing off a Bible study that she had done. Her name was Jeanette Walls. And she closed off that Bible study by saying something like this. She says, we always talk about people that aren't saved, and we tell you need to get saved, and we give you time for an altar call and stuff, and we never stop that. But she made this statement. Are you somebody who invited Jesus into your life? You got saved, and you're disappointed. It hasn't turned out the way that you thought it was going to. And it never does. But because of that, you're disappointed. Oh, you still know you're going to heaven. But the walk that you once started with, the walk that you had, the joy that was always there, no matter what was going on, oh, that's been shoved down so far. And the peace, you're not living because you got disappointed. Maybe there were some tragedies. Maybe there was some unanswered prayers. And I've been disappointed. You all know that, and you've been disappointed. Then she said, well, why don't you just stop trying and just let Jesus build your life? Start over again and surrender. But I tried all these things and I'm miserable and nothing worked. And don't try anything. Just get back to that time of Jesus, I surrender. Used to sing a song, I surrender all. And it's just a matter of surrendering everything to Jesus. Letting go. It's not a matter we thought the Christian life should be like this because we started, many of in my generation started with, God has a wonderful plan for you. Just receive Jesus and he'll start working out that wonderful plan. Well, it wasn't always a wonderful plan according to the people that were walking it through. God does have a plan for your life. But that plan may not always be on the rooftops or the mountaintops. And we've all learned a lot of it's down in the valley, is it not? And maybe you've been so disappointed you just stopped reading the word, you come to church and you sing. But living the life just isn't going on right now. I'm not judging you, and I'm in any way been there. But what I'm saying is, why don't you just come home? Why don't you surrender and say, Lord, nothing worked out the way I wanted it to, but I believe you have a plan and had a plan from the beginning. Whatever that is in my life. Because you've got to realize if you start doing your own thing, it'll end up in destruction. It's a way that seems right unto man, but the end thereof is death. It's destruction. So I'm saying if that's you, come home. Come home. Come on back. Come on back to that intimate relationship with Jesus. Let him embrace you again. That love affair. When I first came to you, there was a love affair, man. I'd walk into work and people say, why are you smiling? I love Jesus. Well, don't smile. I can't help it. Am I right? But you need to come home, man. You need to come back.